Hi guys, so we are going to be working on graphing stories over the course of the next 2 days. So this video is just to give us a little preview material before we begin. Alright, so when we look at graphs, we learn so far that we can analyze certain things like the maximum and the minimum, where it's increasing or decreasing, but we also can tell stories from the graph in real life context. So let's take a look at Linda's trip. Okay, it's important to note the axes and what they stand for. So this x-axis represents time, and the y-axis is talking about distance to the destination. Okay, so what does that mean at this point? At this point, it means she's really far from her destination. And over time, as time goes on, she's getting closer and closer to that destination. All right, and if you look at this end point, this point means she's reached her destination. There's one more important part of this graph. What's happening here? Okay, so as time is moving on, is her distance changing? This is called a constant. Okay, and at this point, time is moving, but her distance doesn't change. Okay, so maybe she was driving, getting closer, and then at this point she stopped for gas, or stopped at a rest stop. Okay, and then she's driving, and then reaches her destination. Okay, let's look at the second one. So kicked football. Again, we want to look at our axes. X is time. Our height is y. Okay, and what's happening over time here? Over time here, it begins. Is the height 0? No, so maybe this is getting kicked above the ground. So starts above the ground. Okay, the football gets kicked. As it gets kicked, the height increases. And what happens at this point? This is the turning point. Or, like we talked about last week, it's the max height. Okay, and think of when you throw something into the air or kick something into the air. It's not going to keep going until the clouds. It's going to stop at some point. So that's the point where the football stops. And then it comes back down. And this is where the football hits the ground. Now these are just sketches. We don't have any concrete data, okay? These are just sketches, and we're analyzing the sketches based off the axis and the information that we're given. All right, so now I want us to sketch this graph with a little bit more data and some more concrete pieces. So let's read the scenario first. We'll annotate, and then we'll figure out what our axes are going to be. So a snowstorm is hitting New York and predicted to snow 2 inches every hour for the first 3 hours. Then the storm is supposed to pause for 2 hours. Once the storm starts again, it's going to snow a 1/2 inch every hour for 4 more hours. Okay, so I see a lot of things there. I see inches, and I see time. So I think that's probably the best move for our axes. So this will be our time. And our time specifically here is in hours. And then over here is our inches of snow. So let's make this 0. And then we'll make 1 hour, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then we'll do the same for our height. Okay, and the reason why I'm numbering it this way is just to space it out a little bit, so that way our whole graph isn't crammed. Okay, so let's go back to that information. We'll go bullet by bullet. So a snowstorm is hitting, okay, we don't care about that. So we only care about 2 inches every hour for the first 3 hours. So that means for hour 1, let's make a little table. Hours, inches. For hour 1, it's going to have 2 inches. For hour 2, it's going to have 2 more. And for hour 3, it's also going to have 2 more inches. That's what that data is telling us. All right, so hour 1 has 2 inches. Hour 2 has 2 more. Hour 3 has 6. So for the first 3 hours, oh, I messed up that graph. There we go. For the first 3 hours, the snow is increasing 2 inches every hour. Okay, so then it pauses for the next 2 hours. So that's hour 4 and hour 5. It pauses. So is my inches of snow changing? No, it's going to stay at 6. So for 2 more hours, the snow stays constant or the same. Okay, and then lastly, it says it's going to go a 1/2 inch for 4 more hours. So we're talking about hours 6, 7, 8, 9 is 4 more hours. And it's going to go a 1/2 inch each of those. So we're going to go plus a 1/2, so that's 6.5. Plus a 1/2 again, that's 7. Plus a 1/2 again, that's 7.5. And once more, that's 8. So then we're just going to go ahead and plot that. So for 6, hour 6, 6.5, hour 7, 7. Okay, and there's no follow-up questions to this, but we want to think about, if the snowstorm stopped there, would I have an arrow? No, that would mean the storm kept continuing on forever, and it doesn't. It's going to stop at some point. Another thing we want to think about is, how long did the storm last? The storm lasted 9 hours. How high was the snow at the end of the storm? 8 inches tall. Okay, so that's how we can analyze some of what we see on that graph, and then there might be some follow-up questions in the future.